Welcome to the Vintage Hollywood Archive channel. Elvis always pursued much younger women, even before he committed to marry one of them. It's unclear if all those relationships were sexual, however. Elvis liked being around teenage girls. In relationship with Elvis Presley, what was he like as a lover? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you're new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Vintage Hollywood Archive channel. The King's troubling obsession. Personal relationships of Elvis Presley. It seems that male celebrities are obsessed with dating younger women. Some of them even went to the extreme of being with underage girls. Like many young men, Elvis Presley longed to surround himself with gorgeous, glamorous women who adored him. Unlike most, he had the opportunity to do exactly that. The singer was linked to a number of high-profile beauties during his short life, and those who have remembered him publicly have generally done so with affection. Elvis wasn't the first celebrity to experience a meteoric rise to fame. His first #1 hit, Heartbreak Hotel, quickly rose up the charts after its release in 1956. He went from being a relative nobody to a superstar recording artist with fans, especially teenage girls, falling over themselves in his presence. Elvis insisting on staying in the company of very young teenage fans. Women couldn't help falling in love with Elvis, and Elvis, well, he couldn't help falling in love with them, even if they were married. And if wise men say that only fools rush in, then Elvis Presley made fools of us all, because who couldn't help falling in love with the king of rock and roll? With his jet black hair, swaying hips, and sultry croon, Elvis was the biggest sex symbol in the world for more than 2 decades. The ladies found him irresistible, and he struggled to resist them too. Over the course of his tragically short career, Elvis dated numerous women, including some of the biggest names in Hollywood, but he married only once, to Priscilla Ann Presley, and even that had a limited shelf life. In the introduction of her book, Baby Let's Play House, Elvis Presley and the Woman Who Loved Him, biographer Alana Nash observes, "No matter if he were young and thin, a vision in gold lame, or middle-aged and paunch, stretching the physical limits of his gabardine jumpsuit, Elvis Presley never failed to affect his female audiences the same way. He drove them crazy. The mere sight and sound of him made women around the world drop all inhibitions and to publicly behave as they never would otherwise, giving into screams, fainting, and wild exhibitions of frenzy." Legendary crooner Elvis Presley dated many women and girls throughout his short but bright career. More than a few revealed interesting and disturbing aspects of his personal life years after the affairs. According to their stories, the king of rock and roll led a private life vastly different from the public persona he presented to fans. The revelation was made in a new book entitled Elvis Presley: A Southern Life. Elvis Presley: A Southern Life also mentions multiple episodes of Elvis engaging young girls to perform for him by mud wrestling in white panties and spying on couples having private moments in one of his Hollywood houses by installing a two-way mirror in a bathroom. Elvis preying on a group of 3 14-year-old girls while on tour during his early career. The girls would pillow fight, tickle, wrestle, and kiss Elvis, who was 22 at the time. There were many women in Elvis's life, but what was he like as a lover? With his jet black hair and blue eyes, Elvis Presley may have been as beautiful as the starlets he dated. At heart, he was just a God-fearing Southern boy. Once asked what type of girl Elvis would like to marry by the press, Elvis replied, "The female kind, sir." Elvis was obsessed with teenage girls and called them cherries. Elvis wanted to be around teenagers to have fun, a mostly platonic way. Elvis was more interested in their company than in sexual exploits. But he did have plenty of affairs as well. Ultimately, the only person who knows Elvis's true intentions toward young women is the man himself. One of the first documented times Elvis hit on a young girl was in 1956. Jackie Rowland was 14 to Elvis's 21, and Jackie's parents discovered the pair in a side room backstage at one of his shows. When Elvis requested to take Jackie to a bar, her mother told him, "My little girl is underage and she is coming home with me." Another woman, Frances Forbes, says that she used to hang around Elvis's house when she was 13 years old. Elvis didn't notice her then, but as soon as she turned 14, he became interested. Forbes says, 14 was a magical age with Elvis. It really was. Elvis invited Forbes along with two other 14-year-old girls to pajama parties in his house, during which he taught the girls to apply makeup and tickled. Elvis requested more young girls, and his manager delivered. One night, the singer removed a group of girls' clothing, kissed and fondled them, and then fell asleep with them in his arms. He was fascinated with the idea of real young teenage girls. It scared the hell out of all of us, said Lamar Fike, a former member of Elvis's entourage. June Wanico was the woman Elvis nearly married in 1956. June was Elvis's first serious love affair, but the touching sentimentality of their 2-year relationship would perhaps be less poignant had Elvis not gone on to become the rock and roll icon. Elvis was a very sensitive person, very tender, but on the outside he was very macho, she says. An outspoken and feisty teenager, June recalls a time when she stood up to Elvis in front of his hangers-on who were beginning to accompany him everywhere. He grabbed her arm, took her into the bathroom and declared, "Look, you are so right. I'm really sorry." He kept her for 5 minutes, then swaggered out, his image intact. June worked hard to keep Elvis grounded, but as his fame and touring increased, the relationship fizzled out, with phone calls becoming less and less frequent. 2 weeks went by, then another week. Surely he would call me for my birthday, I thought. But he didn't. The rock star cheated on his 15-year-old girlfriend Dixie Loke when he was 19. Elvis reportedly slept with a fan while he was in Louisiana in 1954. They had a little accident. The next morning, Elvis informed his friends that he brought the girl to the emergency room and left her there to get a douche. He called his then-girlfriend Dixie Loke on her phone multiple times in desperation. Elvis and Dixie dated between 1953 and October 1955. Sybil Shepherd had a brief affair with Elvis, and she said that being with him was mediocre. Shepherd's recounted experience. He was a great kisser and very sweet, but not the stud she had expected. She ascribed the difficulty to the drugs he was taking. It was hard for him to be a natural man, she said. Additionally, Rebel Without a Cause star Natalie Wood reportedly stormed out of Presley's room 20 minutes after he wooed her, asking his entourage, "What's the matter with your boss? He's all hands and no action. I thought he was supposed to be the king of the sack, but he doesn't want to do it with me." Wood also reportedly told her sister, "He can sing, but he can't do much else." Elvis placed a lot of value on virginity. His preference for young women was widely known, but he wasn't quite the sex fiend that many assumed. Elvis married just once, to a young woman he had courted for nearly 8 years. Most famously, there was his future wife, Priscilla Beaulieu, who was just 14, 10 years his junior, when they met in September 1959. They got to know each other during his stint in the Army while serving in Germany. She was introduced to Presley by an airman named Curry Grant. After meeting Priscilla at a club for service families, Grant took her to meet Presley at his home in the town of Bad Nauheim near Frankfurt. Petite, dark-haired, and with deep-set blue eyes, she was his ideal woman, not least because she reminded him of his mother Gladys in her youth. Elvis jumped up like he was sitting on a hot plate, recalled Grant. "I'd never seen him react to any girl like that." Presley soon had Priscilla backed up against the wall kissing her. At 8:30 p.m., he took her up to his bedroom, and they did not emerge again until 1:30 a.m., when it was time for Grant to take her home. As their nights together continued, Priscilla's concerned parents asked to meet Presley. Unaware that he had boasted to an army friend that he could train her up any way I want, they were instantly charmed by their daughter's new boyfriend. Indeed, he was encouraged to see Priscilla by her mother Anne. She had long dreamed of a career in show business and perhaps believed that some of Presley's stardust might rub off on her. Although sexual from the start, their relationship was portrayed as sweet and innocent, a triumph of love across the age divide. Instantly smitten, he began dating the stunning teen. The couple kept in touch after he returned home, with Beaulieu occasionally visiting her beau in the USA. While Presley assured the Beaulieus that he and Priscilla just played music together as they spent hours hidden away in his bedroom, they both admitted many years later that they had had full intercourse at this time. In her memoir, Elvis and Me, Priscilla writes that Elvis did everything short of alternatives with her the first night they spent together and until they were married. It was as if Priscilla's virginity was another thing that Elvis strangely and sorely needed to maintain. Presley convinced himself Priscilla remained a virgin because he would stop himself continuing their lovemaking just before the vital moment. This vaguest of notions of her purity was key if he was to continue finding her attractive, but he considered himself free to see other women as he pleased. In 1963, she moved there for good, under strict conditions put forward by her parents, who expected that Elvis would ultimately marry her. After sowing a few remaining wild oats, see the entry on Anne Margaret, Elvis did tie the knot with Priscilla in 1967. After their marriage, Elvis would bring other women into their bedroom. He would watch and film his wife with them, sometimes also joining in. Whether Priscilla was into this is undocumented. When Priscilla gave birth to the couple's only child, Lisa Marie, in 1968, Elvis all but stopped making love with her. Elvis had mentioned to me before we were married that he had never been able to make love to a woman who had a child. Their union soon faltered. Priscilla suggested that her husband's sexual interest in her waned once she became a mother, and confessed that she eventually sought consolation in an affair with a karate instructor, Mike Stone. According to her book, she told him of the affair. She writes that Elvis grabbed her and forcefully made love to her, saying, "This is how a real man makes love to his woman." The fairy tale ended in 1972 when the Presleys separated. Their divorce was final a year later, and the two shared custody of Lisa Marie. Priscilla made the decision to open Graceland to tourists in 1982 and remained in the public eye, launching careers as an actress and a businesswoman. Having never remarried, Presley keeps her ex-husband's name and oversees his legacy with discernible pride. 2 years after his and Priscilla's divorce, when he was 39, he began seeing Rika Smith, a 14-year-old friend of his stepbrother. They had a 6-month relationship. His health deteriorating, Elvis couldn't help falling in love once again, this time with a 21-year-old former beauty queen named Ginger Alden. The two got engaged and lived together in Graceland, where Elvis's behavior worsened. Millions of women who had loved him from afar, the hundreds who had physically known that embrace, and how he had died alone at home on the bathroom floor, a woman sleeping in his bed as the life ebbed out of him at the age of 42. How could Elvis Presley, one of the most romantic icons of his time, never have enjoyed a long-lasting, meaningful relationship with a woman? The answer, of course, is that it was simply easier for a man as complex as Elvis to have a relationship with the masses, who asked nothing of him and provided unconditional positive regard. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you're new here.